It is the most beautiful. It is the most beautiful football the world has ever seen. And it lost. For decades, one team has haunted the sport, like a ghost that refuses to leave. Not because they failed, because they were too good to fail, and failed anyway. Ask anyone who watched them. They will not describe a result. They will describe a feeling. The Netherlands of the 1970s did not play football. They reinvented it. But here is the question that has never been fully answered. If they were the greatest team ever assembled, why does the record book list them as runners-up? Twice. 2 finals, 2 defeats, no trophy. How does the most influential team in history end up with nothing to hold? To understand the wound, go back further than the wound itself. In the late 1960s, Dutch football was a backwater. The country had never won anything that mattered. Then a single club in Amsterdam, Ajax, began doing something strange. Players were no longer locked into fixed positions. A defender would surge forward and become a striker. A winger would drop back and become a midfielder. Whoever vacated a space, someone else immediately filled it. The shape of the team breathed. They called it total football. The idea was simple to say, and almost impossible to do. Every player had to be able to play every role. It demanded intelligence, stamina, and a kind of telepathy. It demanded a leader who understood it, not as a system, but as a philosophy. His name was Johan Cruyff. He was thin, sharp-faced, and arrogant in the way only the truly gifted can be. He wore number 14 when everyone else wore 1 through 11, because the old numbers belonged to the old game. On the pitch, he seemed to see 3 seconds into the future. Where others reacted, Cruyff had already moved. With Ajax, he won the European Cup 3 years in a row. Total football was no longer a theory. It was a conquest. So, when the 1974 World Cup arrived in West Germany, the Netherlands did not come as underdogs. They came as a revelation. What happened next still looks like science fiction. The Dutch did not just beat teams, they dismantled them. Argentina, 4-0. East Germany, dismantled. Brazil, the defending champions, the kings of the previous era, beaten and bullied off the pitch. Cruyff scored, glided, conducted. The team pressed so high and moved so fluidly that opponents looked like they were playing a different, slower sport. Neutral fans fell in love. Journalists ran out of language. It seemed less like a tournament and more like a coronation waiting to be formalized. And then came the final. West Germany, in Munich, in front of the host nation. What happened in the first minute of that final has become legend, and like all legends, it hides as much as it reveals. From the kickoff, the Dutch took the ball and simply kept it. Pass after pass, 16 of them. Not a single German player touched it. Cruyff finally accelerated into the penalty area and was brought down. Penalty. Johan Cruyff scored. 1 minute gone, and the Germans had not even touched the ball. The Netherlands led the World Cup final, 1-0, before the home crowd had drawn breath. It was perfect. It was, in a sense, the problem. Because something shifted in that moment. Having proven they were superior, the Dutch seemed to want to humiliate, not to win. They knocked the ball around. They toyed. They sought not just victory, but a statement. And West Germany, wounded and furious, did the most dangerous thing a great opponent can do. They stayed calm. Here is the detail history tends to forget. West Germany in 1974 was not some lucky host. That team contained Franz Beckenbauer, the man who had invented the modern attacking sweeper. the only defender of his age who could control a match from the back. It contained Gerd Müller, the deadliest penalty box finisher the game had ever produced. These were not victims waiting to be schooled. These were champions in their own right, and they had been quietly humiliated by the Dutch celebration before the match had even truly begun. Slowly, the Germans clawed back. A penalty of their own, converted by Paul Breitner, the score level, and then just before halftime, the ball fell to Müller inside the box. He took a touch that looked almost like a mistake, dragging it back across his body, and in one motion turned and struck it low past the Dutch keeper. 2-1. The greatest team in the world went into halftime losing, and they never recovered. The second half is the part nobody likes to talk about. The Netherlands attacked, they pressed, they created chances, but the spell was broken. The team that had spent the tournament making the impossible look effortless now looked human, frustrated, mortal. Beckenbauer marshaled the German defense like a conductor, slowing the tempo. The final whistle blew. West Germany were world champions. The Dutch had lost the one match that mattered most. Why? How does the better team lose? The simplest answer is the cruelest. They believed the trophy was already theirs. They confused dominance with destiny. And football, more than almost any sport, punishes that confusion without mercy. But there is a deeper answer, and it cuts to the heart of who they were. Total football was built on perfection. It required every player to be at his absolute peak, every movement synchronized, every risk justified by superior quality. It was a high-wire act with no safety net. When it worked, nothing on earth could touch it. But it left no margin for an off day, no plan for when the brilliance flickered. The very thing that made them immortal made them fragile. Greatness, taken to its extreme, became its own weakness. And then there is the part that turns tragedy into something stranger. 4 years later, the World Cup came again, in Argentina, in 1978. And the Netherlands reached the final again. A second chance. Redemption written into the script. But this time, there was no Cruyff. The greatest player of his generation refused to go. For years, the world assumed it was politics, a protest against Argentina's military dictatorship. Decades later, Cruyff revealed the truth. Months before the tournament, armed men had broken into his home in Barcelona, tied up him and his wife in front of their children, and held a rifle to his head. After that, he could not bring himself to leave his family for a month in South America. The greatest team's greatest player stayed home, not out of principle, but out of fear for the people he loved. And still, even without him, the Dutch reached the final. Even diminished, they were that good. The match went to extra time against the hosts, Argentina, in a stadium shaking with noise and shredded paper. In the dying seconds of normal time, with the score level, the Dutch striker Rob Rensenbrink struck a shot that beat the keeper and rang against the post. Inches. The width of a goalpost stood between the Netherlands and the World Cup they had chased for 8 years. The ball bounced clear. Argentina scored twice in extra time. And the greatest team that never won had lost a final. Again. 2 finals, 2 defeats, 1 post, no trophy. So what do they leave behind, if not a cup? Look closely at the football played today, and you are looking at them. The high press that suffocates modern teams was theirs. The fluid, positionless movement that defines the best sides in the world was theirs. When a Spanish team passed its way to glory decades later, the manager who designed it had been shaped, as a young player in Barcelona, by a Dutchman named Johan Cruyff. The losers of 1974 quietly rewrote the rules that the winners now follow. Their ideas conquered the sport that their trophy cabinet never could. So return, one last time, to where this began. It is the most beautiful football the world has ever seen, and it lost. But maybe that was always the wrong way to measure it. The teams that won those finals are remembered as champions of a single summer. The team that lost is remembered every single week, in every league, on every pitch where players move like water and space is something to be created rather than occupied. The trophy went to West Germany. The future went to the Dutch. They are listed in the record books as runners-up. History has them down as something else entirely. Not the team that lost the World Cup, the team that won everything except it.